Brought to you by KCB Mobi Loan. Dial *244#, select option 4 to access our Mobi Loan of up to 5 million shillings. KCB Bank. For people, for better.
On Radio 1 FM 90.
Brought to you by Housing Finance Bank, a financial institution regulated by Bank of Uganda. Housing Finance Bank, we make it easy.
Your views, our interviews on Spectrum, Radio 1 FM 90.
Good evening. It's Monday, the 8th of January 2024, and welcome to this edition of Spectrum, coming to you live on Radio 1 FM 90. We are broadcasting live from the Central Building in the heart of our city, Kampala. Radio 1 is also live on its website, which is www.radio1fm90.com. You click on the icon with the word Listen Live. You can still find this radio station on the different radio listening apps: TuneIn, Afro Mobile, your TV channel, Radio Garden, and Stream Africa. Those can be obtained from the Google stores of your smartphone. Look for any of those radio listening apps and look for Radio 1 FM 90. If you have an internet connection, you will be able to listen to us from anywhere across the globe. The other option, if you have a DSTV connection, look for audio channel 897. If you're on Star Times, look for audio channel 97. My name is Kenneth Lukwago Anderson, your host. And today we'll be looking at the budgeting process. And the issue is budgeting for corruption. How is it manifesting in Uganda? Now, as the year 2023 came to an end, and to be exact, on the 13th of December, the executive tabled before Parliament the 2024-2025 National Budget Framework Paper, which indicated that the national budget for that financial year would be 52.7 trillion shillings. Now, the theme of this budget remains the same like the theme for the financial year 2023-2024, which is full monetization of Uganda's economy through commercial agriculture, industrialization, expanding and broadening services, digital transformation, and market access. Some people would say it's a mouthful, but that's a theme probably suggesting how broad this budget will be. Now, today, committees of Parliament began scrutinizing each sector budget, and later they will be making recommendations to the whole House before the whole budget is considered and passed. Now, even as the House considers this budget, there are concerns about budget performance and corruption after a new narrative emerged that corruption is now being budgeted for. Now, the Minister in charge of Finance, Planning and Economic Development, Matia Kasaija, is among government officials who are tired of this trend. He actually said to the President last year that while very many people are busy looking for resources to run the state, a few are stealing money meant for a service delivery. President Yoweri Museveni, in his New Year message, has promised war against the corrupt that he says are fewer, with political power and access to utilization of public resources. So this evening, I host a budgeting expert, someone who closely follows these issues, but also from time to time meets these government officials and even gives advice on how issues of budget should be handled in this country. This is none other than Mr. Julius Mukunda, Executive Director at the Civil Society Budget Advocacy Group, members of the Budget Transparency Initiative. Happy New Year and good evening to you, Mr. Mukunda.
Happy New Year, Kenneth. Good evening, listeners. It's 2024. We are happy that we are still alive. Yes.
You're happy you're still alive.
Yes.
Is that all that matters? That
yes,
you're still alive?
Life is what matters. Then the rest will take precedent. And I hope that we can all hope for a better 2024 than 2023.
All right.
Yes.
So as we hope for a better 2024, 2025 in terms of budgeting, we know exactly what is going on. We are now in the middle of the budgeting process, looking at how it is handled in our country. Before we went for the festive season, the executive tabled before Parliament a budget of 52.7 trillion shillings. Let's first get your reaction on this particular figure, even before we jump in. Is it realistic, or is something that we need to look at closely to understand better?
Oh, again, I mean, good evening, viewers. Thanks for inviting me, Kenneth, so we can talk about the budget, because that's the area where I talk most of it, things I talk about most of the time. First of all, I'm not surprised that actually the budget is the way it is. If you notice that there has been no slight change from the previous budget in terms of the totals, 52 trillion, 0.7, there's a difference of like 14 billion only actually in terms of the proposed budget of the next financial year and the one that we are currently in. So I think in the eyes of the technocrats, they really didn't want to be too ambitious, because there are challenges that they are facing right now that would not allow them to expand, to expand the budget. However, this is the National Budget Framework Paper, and our experience has been that the budget framework paper always has been underestimated. It started with this 52 trillion. Don't be surprised when it comes to the ministerial policy statement, the actual budget, the figure is likely actually to increase. Because my understanding, my take is that, for me, the National Budget Framework Paper really, government has not finished all the negotiation with the development partners, for example. And sometimes these come in towards the end of the budget process, and then it just adjusts. But I think this is really not to be too ambitious, because, let's face it, there are challenges that we are facing in this country that if you want to be too ambitious, you actually end up knocking yourself off. So it should be where it is. If I was the Minister of Finance, I would actually even reduce it further, because you cannot continue to want to spend more and then you are collecting less. Because out of the 52.7 trillion budget that we are talking about, URA is going to only bring around 29.9 trillion, call it 30 trillion. So probably 58% of the budget is what we can finance as a country through Uganda Revenue Authority. So you want always to have that difference, closer and closer and closer and closer. But now the difference is extremely so high. So that's something I would do. I would take it to tell the public. But if again you want to ask yourself, why is it that you have a 52.7 trillion budget, but now we are being told that actually the money available for government to spend on itself is around 22.7.
22.7.
So
what's happening?
You ask yourself what is happening, and what
out of the 52.7 trillion, the only money available
for government
to spend is 22.7 trillion.
22.7. And then you want to ask yourself what's happening, and what is happening is that the debt is taking a toll on the appropriation, on the budget. That if you look at what government can actually, our debt obligations are almost taking the entire half of our budget. So that's a very serious scenario, challenge that we face as a country, because as we continue to, as the debt obligations continue to eat on our budget, there are three scenarios that are going to happen. Number one is that you will find that government ability to deal with future challenges will be limited. So, for example, like how we're dealing with COVID, give people food, distribute, that might not happen. If you get Ebola, for example, and you want to quarantine a place, you want to make sure that people who are there are taken care of, you want to do monitoring, you want to pick the sick and isolate them, that becomes extremely difficult for government because it will not have the resources. So when you have
surprisingly, even the examples you're giving, we borrowed to handle them.
You see now, that is the second scenario. So your inability to deal with emergency situations lead you to start going to borrow more. And when you now again you are worsening the situation. So it is not good to have a huge stock of debt when your ability to service it is extremely very challenging. You need really to reduce your appetite to spend so that you can be able to meet your debt obligation. Let me give you an example of Ghana. When Ghana faced this same situation that we are likely to face, and it defaulted, and it went to IMF told them that first is if you want us to give you money, then your citizens must first feel the pinch. And how does your citizen feel the pinch? You're going to devalue your currency. So which means that if you have 100 shillings and government devalues your currency by 30%, then the value of your currency becomes 70 shillings. So you have 100 shillings in the bank. The government would devalue the currency and you remain with 70. And those are very hard and painful decisions for the government to take. So you don't want to deal with that.
Okay.
You want to really to prevent that.
All right. That's one scenario. Number two, you said there were three likely.
The second scenario, what you are likely to look at is that you are squeezing resources for other programs to deal with debt. So that's why you'll find out that despite our love for agro-industrialization sector, agriculture, to have more resources, we are still stagnating at 3% of the entire national budget. Despite our love for tourism, we are still giving it less than 224 billion for tourism. And yet, these are low-hanging fruits. Why? Because the first call on the budget is to service
the debt.
So you find yourself really spending peanuts on critical sectors that would have revamped your economy, provided employment, increased the income, and also reduce inequality within the communities.
Those things they call unfunded priorities.
So you find that now you have unfunded priorities because
you don't have money.
You don't have enough resources.
Okay.
Lastly is, of course, the issue of crowding out the private sector. In the whole world, where economies have thrived, you found a strong private sector. Now, when you are borrowing so much, and especially like us when we are now borrowing domestic borrowing, you are reducing the available capital for the private sector to borrow. That's number one. Number two is that the interest rate of loans will also be able to be in double digits. And we are told that these loans that are very expensive cannot enable private sector to grow because they will eat on their profitability. So for you to develop, you need to ensure that the private sector in your country have resources available for them through the financial institutions to borrow, raise the capital, invest, provide, improve production, add on value chain, create employment, and then it becomes a cycle so that it can be able to have development within the country. So those three scenarios are areas where debt is going to affect us, not only as a nation, but also as individuals.
All right. I have heard about people saying that we are actually borrowing to meet our debt obligation. Is this true from the figures you're saying? Are we borrowing to pay our debt?
Yes. Now you'll find that there is a component in the budget called refinancing, domestic refinancing. Domestic refinancing means that today you gave me 100 million as a loan. I'm supposed to pay you at the end of the financial year. But I'm unable to do that. So what is going to happen is that I'll borrow again to refinance the existing loan. And that's the refinancing we are talking about. So this figure has been increasing. It started with 4 trillion 5 years ago, and now in the next financial year, I'm seeing that the figure is around like 9.4 trillion Ugandan shillings. Now,
money that we are borrowing to service
debt, we call it domestic refinancing.
Domestic
refinancing. Yes, you borrow to pay the old loan. So now, in the business, that wouldn't be a problem if the figure is reducing. But for us, it is a problem. The figure is increasing, and rapidly. 5 years ago, I told you at 4 trillion.
4 trillion only.
And now we're going to budget for 9.4 trillion. Because our appetite to borrow accelerated during COVID. And also our behavior in terms of spending has also increased, because if you have a supplementary expenditure of 3.5 trillion and you want to borrow for it, definitely your ability now to pay back old loans becomes quite limiting. So that is the problem of borrowing to be able to service old loans. I think the other element also you need to understand is that borrowing will not be a problem, but you want to borrow for what purpose? And I think that's
where the debate has always been.
That's where the debate has.
The government has always says everyone borrows.
Yes, and
they will tell you even the United States is indebted to China.
Very good. The difference is that whereas the Americans will borrow and they will get $7 out of $1 that they have invested, for us, $1 invested, we get 70 cents. And therefore, for them, even if they borrow 100% of their GDP, debt won't be a problem, because they will be able to have return to investment on that particular dollar.
All right. Would I be wrong to say that the Americans borrow strategically? Why, for us, we borrow maybe for not so many serious reasons? Because there are times when I've heard that we have borrowed, but the money has been in the bank for 5 years without actually financing the project they were borrowed for.
Yes, and that is the sad part of the story. That whereas other countries have got robust systems of implementing projects on time and on budget, ours, we are unable to do that. The Auditor General report tells you that we have 15 trillion of undisbursed loans. It means this is the loan, the Auditor General, the latest one of last financial year, that we borrowed money, signed contracts, and the money cannot be disbursed to us because we are not prepared. We borrowed when we are not prepared. And you have so many scenarios of that. You have, for example, the Busegampigi Express, that road, 4 years ago. It's around like 10% of it. UDB can't send money to us simply because we have problems with right of way. You have Kampala-Jinja Express Highway. It can't move on because we signed the contract and we are not prepared to start the road. So
what do you mean we were not prepared? I don't understand. By the time you go to borrow, you know exactly what you want to do. Let's take it to an individual level.
Now, you see, when you go to the bank and you want to get a loan to start a project, you've already done your visibility plan. You know where to pick the chicks. You already know how to get the contractor to help you set up the poultry building.
You have the land.
You have the land where to put it, and everything is ready. So you only need the money to start purchasing. Unfortunately for us, in most cases, when we go to the bank to get a loan for our poultry farm, sometimes we don't have the land where to put it. We want to buy the land. In fact, we want to borrow money to buy the land. And this is part of the resettlement, to have the right of way. For example, we know that the Jinja Kampala Express Highway has stalled because government inability to get the right of way, to buy people off the land.
I used to hear in the past that some institutions can actually not lend to you unless you have what they call counterpart funding.
Yes.
That is the money to settle your other non-borrowing obligations.
Yes,
like
and that shouldn't have been a problem.
Compensating people.
Counterpart funding could actually even put it in the budget and say, yeah, your money is there for counterpart funding. But you see, even if you put it there, you will not survey the land. You will not evaluate the land. I would give you a scenario of the tree of UNRA. UNRA was constructing and reached at a tree and found out that they called the evaluator, the valuer, to say, please, can you come and value this tree as we build this road? The valuer came and found that the tree was worth 5 million by calculating the timber. Little did he know that the owners of the tree had a spiritual value attached to it. And the valuer did not have a formula for calculating spiritual value. So they were stuck for almost like 6 months. And that is a cost. The other element is we rush to have these contracts signed when we are not ready. And that's partly of the corruption probably we're likely to talk about today. That all you are looking out for is to have this contract signed and the rest will roll out later.
How soon does the money get disbursed?
And usually the money that gets disbursed are the commitment fees probably. And for you jump off and leave the place. So there is a need to have a strong gatekeeping function to ensure that before a project is signed, a loan is signed, you are ready to start work the next day. Other than that, we still have those issues of borrowing money we can't utilize, cancelling loans that we have contracted because we are unable to complete and move on.
And then we pay penalties.
And that's also affecting the budget, this budget. Because remember, all the penalties, whatever it is,
they take away from the money for service delivery.
For service delivery. And as such, and that's why I tell people that this country's problem is not lack of money.
Mr. Mkunda, you always meet these people, even in the joint budget transparency initiative, where from time to time you interface with the Minister of Finance. Don't you give them counsel, advise them on these issues?
And I mean, everybody meets them, including myself. I think all of us will provide alternatives. Even today morning, we're in Parliament providing alternatives on how we can improve budget efficiency in this country and address these particular leakages. But my experience, what has happened is that politics has entrenched in the budget process and polarized the whole process to the extent that we've lost focus on what we should fund to revamp the economy and improve the livelihood of the people. I mean, let me give you an example. The upcoming NAM conference, Non-Allied Movement Conference. Now, there is the procurement of vehicles. I mean, we need these services for our guests. Now, instead of procuring them, if you put an advert and say, whoever has a car of this particular standard, please bring it for government hire at 1 million shillings, we would spend only 10% of the amount of money we spent on this particular vehicle.
Because the vehicles are here.
Because people have these vehicles here. You are investing in your own people. You are increasing demand. You are going to increase investments because this is the money that's going to remain in the economy. And that's what the president says. Now you are creating employment in the outside world. So if we cannot think in that particular line, then we keep on wasting resources of government in other areas. Because after NAM, I don't know where we're going to put these vehicles. Are we going to sell them? Where are the CHOGM vehicles, if I can ask? Maintaining them is, you see, such a car, you can't park it for more than 3 weeks if you're not going to drive it. So these are kind of...
Is government actually procuring cars? Because we were told some of these cars are actually being donated by China. Then on top of that, the government has directed its officials with the vehicles that meet the specifications you are talking about to actually bring them over so that they can be used by the guests. Now, is there an indication in the budget that they're actually borrowing?
No,
they're actually
the budget
they're
is
actually
for
going to buy.
The budget is this. This is for the next
financial year. I mean, from your sources
for the next financial year.
Within the budget cycles, are they going to buy vehicles?
There is a budget for NAM as a conference, which has not yet been broken down. But our sources tell us that actually government intends to pursue these particular vehicles.
Okay.
And really, if it is that, then for me, I think it goes to the argument of saying that there are better ways we can actually invest in our resources to achieve even better results. So that's a scenario whereby you need to tweak the thinking and the focus of government to begin to think of investing within itself, rather than looking outside for solutions.
All right. Probably in that budget, 2024-2025, one of the reasons we are borrowing is for the oil sector, because we are moving in that critical stage where certain things need to be done. Are we doing the right thing there, Mr. Mkunda?
I think I support the exploration and getting of the oil from the ground, simply because of the investment we have made so far. We are at a point of no return. You can't say now, let's abandon this, because we have invested a lot. If you go in Western Uganda, look at the road network, you set up an airport in a village, you just can't leave it. But most importantly is that our borrowing was mostly hedged on the production of oil. So it's important that the government invest heavily to have this oil out. Not yesterday, not tomorrow, today. That oil must come out. Because any delay in getting that oil out would have a very fundamental negative consequences on the development of our country. Because we invested expecting returns from that particular oil. And that's why we need to provide all the support we need to ensure that the oil comes out, but also it must come out in an environmental friendly manner. The biggest challenge, of course, is that it's coming up at a time when the climate agenda is also very high, where issues to deal with
renewable energy,
where issues to deal with fossil fuels is being really hard hit. And that's why you find that ECOP is finding it extremely difficult to raise the capital to invest in the pipeline.
All right. Spectrum on Radio 1 FM 90. We need to go for a break now. When we return, we'll be moving into the aspect of corruption. Are we budgeting for corruption? You had Mr. Mkunda there talking about how even that element is manifesting itself in the area of borrowing. Where exactly is the problem, and how is this issue being manifested? Keep your comments coming. Share with us via WhatsApp line, which is 0703 090 090. Spectrum continues after this break.
Spectrum on Radio 1 FM 90.
Well, thank you very much for staying with us. Our topic of discussion today on Spectrum, budgeting for corruption. How is it manifesting in Uganda? My guest, Mr. Julius Mkunda, Executive Director at the Civil Society Budget Advocacy Group. They are members of the Budget Transparency Initiative, where they, from time to time, with other civil society organizations, meet and discuss with the Ministry of Finance, Planning and Economic Development. We began this discussion by understanding the figures of the 2024-2025 national budget, 52.7 trillion shillings. We also looked at the issues of borrowing and how it's eating away the resources that would actually help this country in terms of service delivery. Now, let's jump in and look at this aspect of corruption in our budgeting process. As the year came to an end and this budget was actually presented to Parliament, I had some murmurs out, and people were complaining not only about the supplementary budget that had been passed, but also people are saying now corruption is official. It's actually being reflected in the budget. Have you had something or seen something like that, Mr. Mkunda?
You know, I started that debate, I think, 2-3 years ago. And I said that corruption in this country is no longer about highway robbery or somebody has raided the treasury and run away. But it's really very well executed. You plan for it. You put items in the budget that are likely to give you resources on a personal note that benefit you alone. Then put it in the budget. Send the budget to Parliament. Parliament approves the budget. And then you go ahead and execute your corrupt programs. And people seem not to have to take it that seriously. And now you see it is coming up. Because, and why do I say this? You see, you can't say you need, let me give you examples. First is that, I don't know if you recall when we had the issue of locusts.
I do.
In Eastern Uganda.
And we are even told they are likely to come back.
Yes.
So we had something like
I don't know. Now, I came across a budget for it. And some of the items are really shocking. You need billions of money for stone throwers. Because you want to hire stone throwers.
Yeah, you want people to throw stones for nothing?
Stone throwers.
First, they have to gather the stones. They have to spend time throwing.
Then you
stones.
need money for gathering stones. You know, you see. Yes, like you said, we need stone throwers. But do you require them at $1 billion? Today morning, I received another message, and somebody said, "No, do you know what? That the NAM vehicles, I mean, I need to verify this, but said that, see, the NAM of the vehicles that we are hiring for NAM will require 2.3 billion to be washed." Now, what kind of scenario am I trying to give you?
There's even what we have had, all ministers are going to be trained.
Now, you hear that all ministers as etiquette is concerned. Now, it's okay to train ministers for etiquette, but for me, I'm a person of numbers. And if you put 2.5 billion or 10 billion to train ministers on etiquette, then that's a corrupt item, if I can say. So when we begin to put unnecessary expenditures into the budget,
nugatory expenditure,
those are called nugatory expenditure, that with the intent of spending on a personal gain or on an item that are likely to cause waste, I call that one outright corruption in the budget process. So those kind of expenditures once you find them there, then you know that corruption is being planned, budgeted for, executed, and budgeted for, appropriated, and also executed. So if you find an item, for example, and say you want to monitor cabinet decisions, we pay you salaries, for heaven's sake, for you to draft these decisions. Now you want the money to monitor them. So what's the function of the OPM, monitoring and evaluation unit? So it defeats your understanding that you can divide roles and then you end up having those kind of expenditures.
All right. So now, this budgeting for corruption, is it being done in a syndicate or it's a one-off? How do you think it's manifesting itself?
It's a syndicate now. It's very complicated. It's a syndicate. I will give you another scenario. Up to now, I have not got official response from the government of Uganda, wherever it is, about the missing health centers in Ntungamo. I have not. And my understanding, as I stand today, is that those health centers that we found out were missing or actually missing.
And I was talking to one of the journalists who actually did a documentary about those health centers and asking him what happened to the details that you brought out.
Up to now,
we have not seen any action.
Yes. An indication that actually they don't exist, because if you can't you prove that they are there, take people there, that these health centers are there. But do you know to budget for a health center what it means? It can never be done by one person. No, it cannot be. Because you need the cow and the district health officer to first create that. You need approval from the Ministry of Health to do that. Then you need to go to finance and have either a vote for that particular or code for that particular center to be able to do that. You need to recruit people to run that health center, because you can't have a health center that has no personnel. That health center must also have a code for it to be supplied medicines. So it can never be one individual. And that's why corruption in the budget, the way we are bringing it right now, is such a syndicate and a complicated process that we need to overhaul our entire budget process. And today, I agree now that we actually need zero budgeting. To say there is no money today, let us start budgeting newly. And then we see what happens. Corruption in the budget also comes in the sense of, you'll find out that the Auditor General has been doing a payroll audit. For heaven's sake, how can you be an accounting officer and you don't know the number of employees you have in your department, to the extent that you even pay for those who died long time ago? Then they are not on the register. Others are not there at all. Even you start paying people at different grades. You are in the grade 1, they pay you as grade 2. You are in the grade 2, they pay you as grade 1. So those kind of behaviors and practices tantamount to corruption in the budget, because you budgeted for it and that's how you want to spend your entire resources. The other scenario, and which I've told people, is that you can't be a government without standards. How does a hospital look like, a government hospital look like? If you look at these old hospitals, you go to Kamboga, you go to Chenjojo, all these hospitals, they all look the same because that was a government standard. Today, I'm yet to see any government standard, because a standard is costed. That means that when you are budgeting, you budget by that particular amount of money. But now, because you don't have a standard, you budget for any amount of money you want. So a government that doesn't have a standard that is costed, you are creating room for individuals to start inflating prices because they have nothing that is guiding them. And that's why my argument has been that you must have, as a government, an annual price list of government that reflects the market, that reflects the market. If this bottle of mineral water at the market price is 1,000, why would government buy it at 5,000? For heaven's sake. As a government, you need to say, for us in the next financial year, drinking water will be at 1,000. Let people supply. Anything more than that, we shall not accept it because we know our water is at this particular amount of money. So that you create some kind of competition. Those who can be able to reduce the price, provide in bulk, they know what to do. People can plan on how to supply government. But now people can't plan because they don't know the price under which the procuring department is going to set. They don't know the standards of government. And in that way, you are creating room for people to inflate prices, for people to provide, to give us substandard items, for people actually even fail to procure or to supply goods and services to government. You have heard of people, after he has signed the contract to provide government goods and services, he fails simply because there are no standards for government to be able to provide. So, unless we have these standards in place, unless we provide the price list, unless we agree and say these are the things we want to invest in and this is the outcome of our investment, then definitely corruption will always be planned for, budgeted for, appropriated and executed, and we continue to lose the money from that.
Right, and there's one other particular aspect, things that we thought would go away in the budgeting process. And I remember the current Secretary of the Treasury, Mr. Ramadan Govi, he used to feature on this platform from time to time. He used to talk about this bad culture of supplementary budgets. And some people have been touting him and saying he's now doing the things he used to speak against. What exactly do you think is going on?
Of course, you can never wish away supplementary budgets, but I think the debate should be what contains in the supplementary budget, and I think for me that's the most important part.
And some people were saying that's part of corruption in the budget.
And yes, I agree.
That's why I'm bringing it closer.
And you have two scenarios here, and you neighbor should forgive me because I usually use their example, but they are not like that. Because it's one of understanding. So you see, the core mandate of UNEB is to mark exams. So if UNEB administer their exams, exams.
Their area is exams.
Exams. If today UNEB did not put marking of exams in their budget and decide to put travel abroad, training and other things, and then later they come and say, in the supplementary budget, we don't have money for marking exams, they will cause stampede in the parliament. Why? Because marking exam is the core mandate of UNEB to such an extent that a country cannot be there without administering and marking exams for its students. So you cause a stampede. And that is what is happening in most government agencies. So instead of budgeting for your core mandate, you budget for all other things that are not necessary, but are for you as a sector to live a bourgeoisie life. And as such, time for executing your core mandate, you don't have the money, and then you run to ask for supplementary supplementary budget. That's why you find in supplementary budget there are salaries, and then you ask yourself, the first call on your budget are salaries, wages for your employees, but it's not there simply because you put in other things. But you know that if you say you have no salaries, everybody's you're going to cause a panic. So that's a room also.
So what kind of budget is that, where you reflect that you will be paying salaries, but then you actually do not have the money to pay salaries?
That's exactly what I'm telling you, that the system of budgeting has weakened. That we need to tune and improve the system of budgeting so that if you're a sector, export promotion board, what is your core mandate? What are you supposed to be doing? That should be the first call on your budget before anything else. But if you decide to spend on other things and then you forget about your core mandate, then that is poor planning and the budgeting process in the country already. And now you start causing supplementary budgeting. But also, what I have also noticed is that the inability of Parliament of Uganda to execute and put a stop to this madness of supplementary budgeting. Because I have not seen the Parliament of Uganda saying, no, do you know what? This supplementary budget, we are throwing it out because it does not fit within the criteria of supplementary budget. We've actually analyzed the recent supplementary budget and found out that actually 1.2 trillion would have, out of 3.5 trillion, 1.2 trillion does not qualify to be of supplementary nature. A supplementary budget would require three major criteria. One is that that expense must be unavoidable, which means that it has come, whether you like it or not, you must spend on it. That expense must be unabsorbable, that you don't have resources to deal with it before you ask for supplementary budget. But the biggest of all is that that expense should have been unpredictable. You did not expect it to happen, but it has happened. So when you list all the expenses in the supplementary budget, you can only find out that almost 1.2 trillion actually does not qualify. And that qualifies to be a loss to government, and people should pay back that particular money. But Parliament has not done that. It just sweeps off and approves, and then it goes.
Well, this issue of supplementary budgets, when the request is actually brought in Parliament, many people do not understand the process of supplementary budget. Some people actually think the government is going to spend, while sometimes we hear that actually the government had already spent that money.
Yes,
the
law and the constitution provides the government to spend 3% of its budget without parliamentary approval. And that's part of the supplementary budget. But anything more than that, they must seek parliamentary approval. Government should report to Parliament that it spent money without parliamentary approval. It's allowed in the law. But the biggest part is that what you would find is that Parliament might decide not to approve certain expenditures, but then the government will go ahead and spend it in the supplementary budget. Because I remember, for example, the amount of money wanted to give to Munyonyo to improve the renovation in the preparation for NAMO conference, because Parliament had raised questions on the relationship between the government of Uganda and why you are investing in Munyonyo. They had not been convinced, and then they removed that expenditure. But in the wisdom of government, they went ahead and spent that money under the supplementary budget. But you see, that wouldn't be a problem. But if you are, because you see now,
why wouldn't that be a problem? If somebody who approves the budget is telling you don't spend,
you see,
and you spend.
What I'm saying is that NAM, we were told 2-3 years ago
that we are going to host
that you are going to host NAM.
We actually asked for it.
Yes. And we are seeking a supplementary budget as if we never planned for it. You see, that's the kind of unpreparedness and a seriousness that you find in the whole budget process.
I guess this takes us back to the discussion we had in the first segment of this show, that money is simply not enough.
No, it's not about money not being enough. This country's problem is not lack of money. This country's problem is setting priorities. If you go and ask for NAM, when you return back to Kampala, the first thing you do is to cost it and put it in the budget. You don't merely start hurrying, fixing potholes, doing all of these sorts of things at the last minute. You look and serious in front of your guests. So we need to plan. I think our planning is still very weak in this country. And if we cannot plan properly, let me tell you, we will not achieve the goals and objectives we have, even in the NDP3. And that's why they tell you, we are being told that NDP3, we only achieve 17% and in our review. And of course, we shall always blame COVID for everything. But for heaven's sake, that was a very big embarrassment. All
right, we have some feedback coming in from the listeners who sent in their messages via the WhatsApp number 07039090. And I'll begin with Louis Kizito, who says, just in case you missed this, government attempt to borrow 3.5 trillion in the domestic treasury bond market has increased the interest rates on treasury bond by 2%. This borrowing was really unnecessary. How I wish the people who convened the non-aligned movement meeting used that chance to call for a review of the global financial system to have a neutral reserve currency, like the IMF special drawing rights. The current strength of the dollar is putting strain on African foreign currencies, foreign currency reserves. Zambia and Ghana defaulted on its debts. Ethiopia defaulted last week. Kenya is next. That is Louis there with that comment. Yeah. Good evening. Government has not bought cars for NAM and the G77. The cars were donated by the Chinese government. Besides, NAM conference begins this Friday 15th. Julius, which budget for NAM are you reviewing? That is Patrick listening in from Ntinda. Then somebody writes in and said the debt burden Uganda government borrows to spend on luxuries, which is irrational and even when unprepared to utilize the money. This leads to increasing the burden of paying interest for unused funds. Secondly, as Mr. Mkunda put it in his statements, which may sound jokes but true, then every good intention Ugandan wonders if we have a government in charge. Lastly, Mr. Mkunda should not be surprised for missing health centers in Tungamo, since Lubowa Hospital, for which taxpayers spent 3 trillion, is still missing 5 years after the funds were released. Well, that listener didn't leave a name. Peter in Mubende, nothing but corruption is what we live to remember in Uganda. We expect nothing to change until there is a change of government, maybe. That is Peter there in Mubende. Very quickly, some of your responses to these issues.
Yes, I think, it's the raw example, really, that drives home
the point
that we do not lack money in this country, but on how we set our priorities. That you have a project which is non-existent, and you're going to spend the money 2.7 to monitor it. I mean, it might, it sounds simple, but this is sad. That as a country, that as of now, we should be having actually a hospital. Remember, as of because we're supposed to be in
first class hospital, not just a hospital,
specialty hospital. We should be having it at all, and we don't have it.
And prepared even to handle NAM delegates.
So it's really a classic example on how we are wasting resources. For Patrick, I think remember what I said. I said NAM has a budget which is not broken, and we are yet to break it down and see where money for vehicles is coming from. I would be very happy, Kenneth, if I hear that China has actually donated all the vehicles for the NAM conference, because for me, really, I feel sad, and it's extremely unfair that we spend money on these one-time events so much that after that we have nowhere to put the resources that we are invested in. You are invested in these particular areas. So, Patrick, please, we would definitely be able to get back to you, with that. But I mean, the whole point really for me is that as citizens, there are a number of things I think that we need to look at very carefully. One is that we need really to get interested in the budget process, Kenneth, because the lesser the people get involved, the more corrupt tendencies tend to appear. People are going to start budgeting for their own homes, for their own districts, and forget that we are a country or as a nation. And if we don't get involved, this kind of practices definitely will continue. Budgeting is not only at the national level, but also at the district level. You just can't imagine, for example, that a district will not have a district service commission seat to recruit people simply because their sons and daughters have not finished school. So that such a district remains without a district finance officer, without a district health officer, without the core personnel of the district who are likely to deliver service delivery are not there simply because of the politics within the district and the inability of the district to make a resolution to put up a district service commission to be able to do that. So I really encourage Ugandans to be able to get interested in the budget process, whether at the local level or at the national level. Because in that way, Kenneth, is the only way we can reverse this trend of how we are misusing public resources.
Yiga Samuel Mary, listen again from Nam Londo Zone in Bwege, says, Mr. Kenneth, thanks for the show. Uganda's budget nowadays has lost meaning. Much loans taken with no impact on the ground. When it comes to activities done, useless supplementaries for a few government officials to steal. Truly speaking, we need a change of government. Well, this is the second person suggesting issues around change of a government as a solution to the problem at hand. Very quickly, Mr. Mkunda, we are coming to the end of this show. What will be your closing remarks, your advice, and probably share with us what will you be doing this particular year, in this new year, as people who handle budget issues to ensure that at least there's something we can get from the national budget?
Yes, I think not all is lost, really. Not all is lost. And I can assure Ugandans that if we can all work in a concerted effort, we can be able to salvage some work. For example, I think, like I said from the beginning, first and foremost, let us all get involved. Let us all ask questions, because this budget is for all of us, not for anybody else. That health center where you are, really, I can tell you, is for you, not for the people who are in Kampala. So ensure that you monitor how that it is being done. Now, we have not talked about the monster, which is PDM. Now, money being given to these villages.
We'll have another day for it.
And I assure, I can tell you again, please go ahead and see who is getting that money. It's very, very important, because if Julius gets that money and he's in Kampala and that money he's getting it from Arua, the resources of people from Arua are being taken here in the Kampala. So let the resources remain Arua where it was supposed to be.
All right.
Lastly, I think for me is the budget process has we are in the middle of it. The national budget framework has come out. Please tune in and listen into these kind of shows. We are in Parliament making presentations. And of course, after that, there will be the draft estimates of the real budget. And I encourage each and every citizen, wherever they are, please participate.
All right.
In the budget process.
With that, we come to the end of Spectrum for today. Thank you very much for listening and contributing to the show. I must thank you, Mr. Mukunda, for always stepping forward to enlighten our listener about these particular issues. Up next, we're going to have the news in English from Miss Josephine Ndakano. Thereafter, we'll have the Soul Train with BB Junior.
Spectrum on Radio 1 FM 90.
Brought to you by Housing Finance Bank, a financial institution regulated by Bank of Uganda. Housing Finance Bank, we make it easy.
The views expressed on this show are not necessarily those of this radio station or its management.